Hey everyone, this is Erica Lucas, your host and founding member of VEST, an organization connecting women across industries, regions, and career levels so that together we can expedite the pipeline of more women in positions of power and influence. Welcome to another episode of the Vester podcast, where we explore the invisible barriers holding women back in the workplace and share stories of women building power collectively.
Why do you think it's hard for us to understand that sometimes investing in ourselves pays dividends? Like the woman that you help right now, she's making 3 times what she was making.
Well, I'll start with the normalization of getting help for things that you need, right? Sometimes you do that for if you happen to have kids. You'll say, oh, you're struggling in math, let me get you a tutor. Without even thinking about it, right? And you may invest that kind of money in someone helping out. Oh, do you need lessons? Singing lessons? Do you want to learn how to play a guitar? It's like any other skill or something that you want to learn, except the return on the investment. So I play the guitar. I might make money if I go to a lounge and I play and maybe people tip me or something. But as a coach, you're helping someone rethink the way they navigate their career spaces. So the return on investment is not just financial, it's just in the way you show up and the way you're respected.
In this episode, we discuss the value of executive coaching with Dr. Sofia Pertuz, Managing Director for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the Billie Jean King Enterprises, a women-owned and women-led investment, consulting, and marketing firm that puts Billie Jean King's philosophy and brand value to work, capitalizing on her long-standing advocacy for equality. This episode is sponsored by Audible, the leading provider of audiobooks, podcasts, guided wellness programs, and more. So if you're looking for a book on how to level up at work or any other subject, Audible has over 1,000 titles for you to choose from. Head over to www.audibletrial.com/vesther and get a 30-day free trial plus a free credit to use on the book of your choice. To access our guest's full bio and for show notes, go to www.vesther.co/podcast. This recording was part of a more intimate coaching session with VEST members and has been repurposed to accommodate this episode.
But Sofia, why don't we start with this? Tell us about your role with the Billie Jean King's Enterprise, and then how did you find yourself there?
That's a great question. So I serve as managing director, and I'm currently leading our diversity, equity, and inclusion consultancy services and practices. Billie Jean King Enterprises is a firm focused on equity, inclusion, and the intersection of sports and the future of work. So pretty much leadership and looking at the future of how especially gender equity falls into that. So as many of you might be aware, Billie Jean King, she was the first to stand up for women in sports and did a lot over her career and her time to make sure that women were getting their due, not just with respect and attention, but also financially. That is like a top priority, a top, value. Many people don't realize like how much of a trailblazer she has been. And how I found my way there is I started out my 25 years in higher education. I worked and lived on several campuses. My last role in higher ed was Associate Vice President and Dean of Students. And I got recruited by the Jet Foundation, which you already heard is a nonprofit focused on suicide prevention and protecting the emotional health of young people. And it was interesting because it was connected to higher ed because they work on systemic change around creating systems of support for students. So when I got recruited, I was like, I don't know if I'm ready to leave higher ed. That's so different than what I've done. I've shifted different roles, but it was always from one institution to another. Just like any transition's tough. But when you leave an industry altogether, very nervous, but it worked out really well. And because they worked on college campuses, it was transferable skills for me in my mind. I was able to really just blend right in. And I did that for a few years, and summer 2020 happened. And as you know, it was the pandemic, there was racial reckoning, there was so much happening with the murder of George Floyd. A lot of companies I would say, woke up and decided or realized that they had to focus on how they can address racial equity and, in general, gender equity and the mental health of their employees. So all these things came together, and I was still at the JED Foundation at the time, but I was getting requests and outreach from friends who had seen me do training. Over time, I had already done diversity, equity, and inclusion training. I had done workshops, and they were picking my brain about different things they were trying to do. So it was a very interesting back and forth, and it ended up, I ended up consulting for them and other companies around that time. So I officially started my business summer 2020. And around that time, I had already joined another organization called Chief, and started meeting people from different industries. So not only did I leave higher ed, now I'm in the nonprofit world, and I started meeting people in the corporate world in a more substantial way. So I got recruited to help out or to work with Billie Jean King Enterprises with their consulting clients for diversity and inclusion. And when I met them, I got recruited by a colleague that worked with me, Therese, and she reached out and said, we may have an opening for a position where we can work with clients on our DEI strategy. And when I met with Billie Jean King and her partner, Alana, that was it. I mean, when I heard their values were similar to mine, I was all about making sure my focus first was about Latinas and making sure that Latinas were getting their due. As we know, we're like almost last on the pay scales in many situations. So our values were very much aligned with how gender equity played into how the workplace needs to be and how people need to treat each other. So after that conversation, we went back and forth, and here I am.
What led you to executive coaching specifically for women?
I'll start with my own journey. Anytime I was making a really big decision, I remember one person saying, you should call a coach and engage with someone who can really give you a perspective outside of your own everyday world. Sometimes you have colleagues and coworkers that you'll ask them advice, but they have a vested interest in you, but they're very biased, right? So sometimes finding a coach that is externally to you and will be really supportive of your journey from a detached perspective and really asking those big questions. So how I engaged with coaching first was there was one really big position that I wanted. And I was trying to figure out, how do I verbalize, like, if I don't have these pieces, you know how there's the statistics that men will apply for any job no matter what qualifications they have, but women are like, oh no, I'm missing those 3 things. Meanwhile, you got the other 25. So I knew that as I was looking at certain positions that I was missing a few things. And when I did work with a coach, we were able to really transform my language around, okay, so right now you don't have a full, you're supervising this many, and this job is a bigger supervision slate, but look at all the other things you do. You have a committee where people are accountable to you, people with higher positions than you. That is a campus-wide position. I was like, oh, I didn't think of it that way. And what else? Oh, you don't have a big budget, but the budget you have, you do a lot with. And you can really articulate how you do it and how efficient you are in the systems that you have in place. Talk that through. Because even if the budget is 100,000 or if it's 5 million, you have to do very similar things to keep things in order and have some checks and balances in place, right? So that's how I discovered coaching along the way. And I've had several coaches that have helped me through different transitions, but having that external person to really talk through. So how I became a coach, I've always been a mentor to many different people, as many of us are, right? We probably have people that ask us for advice or want to know more about the industry that we're in or the jobs that we hold. So I've had people do that, but mentoring is like a one way, I'm going to teach you what I know, where coaching is more of, let me get out of you what you want to do and what's motivating you so that you can move yourself and motivate yourself. Because if you can't motivate yourself, then you're not going to get to that place or achieve the goals that you're trying to get at. So sometimes you need that support outside of yourself. And have you ever given your resume to a friend and they send it back and go, looks great, but they don't catch the typos, they don't catch the run-on sentences, they don't catch, because that's not what they're there to do. And just so I clarify, not every coach does resume reviews. Some are specialized in that way. But to me, that's the example of, like, I became a coach because I was like, you know what, while I'm mentoring people, I think there's a different way that I can be helpful and share what I know and kind of give perspective by asking the right questions. So I went to summer 2020. Again, it's like the pivotal summer. I started this course called Latina Insight Academy, where I took findings from my dissertation. My dissertation was on mid-level Latinas and how race, ethnicity, and gender impacted their career trajectory. And what I found was common stories. There were 26 Latinas that I interviewed. I was supposed to do 20, but I was renaming them by alphabet to give them a pseudonym. And I was like, I better finish the alphabet, 26. So I have A through Z. And some of my findings were so concerning to me because some of it was internal stuff that we were getting in our own way by not going for opportunities, by not taking risks, by not getting the help we need and asking for things. The other side of it was external stuff that was like barriers other people were putting and saying to us about who we were or who we weren't, that we kind of weren't able to break through. So that summer, I created Latina Insight Academy. A few people were reaching out to me just saying, I'm in the middle of a transition. I'm thinking about something. I'm like, we get it together, of course. And I picked the top topics like connecting to your values, communicating your brilliance. What are the things that you need to do to negotiate better? How do you interview? Those were the skills. But part of the program, it was like a course, but I found myself coaching people too, because I did one-on-ones. And I was like, this is really great. I really enjoyed that it wasn't a two-way conversation. It was one way. That person's life journey, what they needed. And there was something so, I can't put my finger, like, it was just inspiring to me to go through somebody's like thought process around their own personal life and how that intersects with their journey in their career and the decisions they were making or not making. So I got formal training and got certified last year because I was like, okay, am I doing this right? Am I mentoring is like, we're having a conversation, it's two-way. I'm giving you information, but what I learned, and I'm glad that I got certified and did the training for coaching, is what is going on for you? What do you need to do differently? How do I take what you're telling me and turn it into sentences, not statements back? I mean, some of it is giving you back a summary of what you said, just so you hear it. Sometimes you say something, and when I repeat it back, you go, "Oh, I said that." Yeah, you said that. But the coaching training piece is really getting people to rethink and reframe and, in a way, get out of their own way. So I know that was a long answer. It's like taking my findings from my dissertation and really just frustrated to see so many women, especially Latinas that I was interacting with, having a really hard time advocating for themselves and advancing and trying to find those positions and trying to articulate those transferable skills that they know how to do it. Because the other, and I'm throwing out non-statistics, but another finding, and I wish I had the stat in front of me, was that, men are promoted and hired based on their potential, but women, you have to prove it. And that's where we internalize that, right? That we have to already have everything done, that we already have to have the skills. So having a way to talk about what you're capable of based on what you have done, but just something different. I think that's another part of coaching that I get so excited when it clicks and someone's like, "Oh yeah, I have done that." I'm like, "Yeah, you just did it in that way, not in this way."
Can you share one or two examples of, when you've seen successful outcomes from executive coaching, particularly in women?
Oh yeah. The one that comes to mind is, and I used to be in higher ed, so it's interesting how I've had people come to me now who are considering leaving higher ed because they've thought about it, but they weren't sure if they could transfer the skills, just do it, but also can they speak to it in an interview. And there was one of my clients who had been working at one institution for 15 years. She did all the things that you're supposed to do in higher ed. She got a PhD. That's like the highest degree you could get. So that as you move forward, whenever they say, "Oh, you don't meet the qualifications," we're looking for preferred qualification is a PhD. And now there's enough people out there that have them that they can just not consider you just for that one thing, even though you could have a lot more years of experience. So she felt like, okay, she got a bachelor's, she had the work experience, she got her master's, she got her PhD, and yet she could not break out of a role that she was felt like stuck in. She even moved from one department to another, thinking, okay, if this is how I can advance. And she went from a really safe department where they respected her and they were similar in her background, Latina, and many of them were Latinos, to another department where everyone was white, everyone she reported to and worked with directly. So she felt treated differently. And as they were considering planning ahead for the next few years, she didn't see herself in that plan. And at one point, while I'm coaching her, she's in tears because she's like, I'm trying to figure out how to just get to the next role. I just want to be promoted. I want to change my title even. And there was a moment where she asked, where am I in this plan? And they said, oh, we're trying to figure that out. And during coaching, I said, what do you need to do to figure out how you don't fit? Like, what is your fit? Is this your fit? And she basically was like, no, it isn't. Because if I have to fight so hard just to get considered when I'm already there, how to be put into a plan, then you're not part of the plan. So when that sunk in, and it was like a mourning process, really, a stage of grief. We go through the stages of grief on that and say, I imagine myself advancing here and staying here because I love this place and this institution has done a lot for me, but let's consider something else. So we started going through that journey and went through her resume line by line. What do you love to do? What do you hate to do? What do you never want to do again? Let's highlight the things you want to do more of. And you know what started emerging? A lot of the opportunity stuff she was doing, a lot of creating work and co-op and internship opportunities was some of part of her position and what she was doing. So we started looking for jobs. I said, look up internship, look at, and there was a position that emerged in the financial services industry. Perfect. We read through it and it was like, she's like, oh, but I probably don't qualify. I'm like, let's go through the qualifications. We did the whole exercise again. And it turned out we ended up turning almost every qualification green as we started rethinking and re-looking. Well, I've never done recruitment. Have you ever hired student employees? Yes. Have you ever onboarded a large group of students at a time? And I knew her job. So I was like, have you stood in front of thousands of people to bring them on to a new campus? Yes. Okay. And once we got there, she got there. Because even if she applied, she has to I feel like you need to put that energy into the universe. So long story short, she ended up interviewing, going through it, articulating her transferable skills. Not only did she end up leaving that institution, it was painful for her, but she tripled her salary and got a bonus at the end of the year. This was a year ago that we worked together, got a bonus at the end of the year, even though they said we don't usually do that for anybody who's been less than a year. It was like 8 months at the time. And we see you doing great things here. We see you on the path for, they were telling her what path they saw her. Meanwhile, she came from a place that was not even putting her in the plan, right? So that's one, I would say, my greatest success, only because it made me cry to know that we went back and forth with negotiating, because even when they offered her money, I'm like, go back, ask for 10% more. But it's already at the top of the range that they told me. I'm like, I don't care. We're going back. Guess what? They gave her that 10% because they knew she was valuable and they knew what she was capable of. And she was able to truly articulate it, and she's doing great. That's one example I can think of that was a journey, a lot of tears involved, a lot of going through what could have been, why don't they see me? Why don't they see it in me? I'm like, don't worry about them.
Yeah.
These other people see it. And not only do they see it, they're paying for it 3 times as much as you made before.
Yeah. It's interesting because consistently another pattern that we hear in multiple sessions is the women tend to, I'm sure men do it too. I'm not, I don't think this is a gender only, but we tend to align our identity so much with the role or the organization that we're in that we often let go of our own values or our own, what makes us happy? What are we working for? And so it's interesting that you mentioned as you were working with your client that she kind of, she was so looking forward to moving along with this organization that she forgot what actually makes her, be the best performer, achieve the best performance. I can relate that even to myself at the last firm that I worked for. Yeah, I achieved partner level and I had the title and I had the money, but I felt powerless. Like even though you achieve more power, I just felt powerless because to your point, that the space wasn't designed for me, right? I was the only woman, I was the only person of color, all of this stuff. And so I constantly felt like my voice wasn't being heard, even though I had the same in paper, the same title and all of that. And then I wonder why sometimes it takes us women a while to say, hey, I need to make time to figure out, okay, how do I want to contribute? What are my values? What am I working for? How do I define success? Not how everybody else defines success, but and I think that that's a great way of using an executive coach, because I think executive coaches also are very good at keeping us accountable, right? I mainly use my executive coach to keep me accountable because it's very easy for me to like, oh, squirrel, or, oh, let's do this because it's a nice thing to do. I also tend to like feel guilty if I say no to things. So like having an executive coach for me, it's more so about like accountability and like helping me get out of my own head and do all of the, and then really helping me like stay true to who I want to be and how, what am I building towards and how am I contributing? One of the challenges I think that sometimes stops women from reaching out to executive coaches is we don't know how to find them. And also like, and this is just consistent across the board from launching Best, right? And getting to where we are, that we see, we as women have, if we are investing in anyone else, whether it's our kids, our family, our loved ones, our friends, nonprofits that we serve on their boards of, at non-paid boards, we're all about giving and investing. But when it comes to investing in ourselves or our own professional development, it seems like a luxury. Why do you think it's hard for us to understand that sometimes investing in ourselves pays dividends? Like the woman that you help, right? Now she's making 3 times what she was making.
Well, I'll start with the normalization of getting help for things that you need, right? Sometimes you do that for if you happen to have kids. You'll say, oh, you're struggling in math, let me get you a tutor. Mm-hmm. Without even thinking about it, right? And you may invest that kind of money in someone helping out. Oh, do you need lessons? Singing lessons? Do you want to learn how to play a guitar? It's like any other skill or something that you want to learn, except the return on the investment. So I play the guitar. I might make money if I go to a lounge and I play and maybe people tip me or something. But as a coach, you're helping someone rethink the way they navigate their career spaces. So the return on investment is not just financial, it's just in the way you show up and the way you're respected. What I've seen though, unfortunately, is that people will not invest in themselves. They'll put money into other things that are more surface, like designer clothes. Like I've actually had a discovery session and then we'll talk about pricing and they go, and I'll go there with some people like, so tell me the last time you bought a high-end item. They were like, oh, I bought a Louis Vuitton bag for $1,800. I'm like, so a few months of coaching versus this bag that took from you as opposed to something you're going to get, right? And the idea of normalizing coaching in the world of work, most CEOs, when they get appointed, get a coach. And not just a coach that doesn't charge like hundreds of thousands of dollar coaches, right? Over time. And that's normal because they know taking on big roles in C-suites is a lot of responsibility. And it's a lot of different ways to think about the way you've already been working and you may have to shift. Those shifts are critical for the bottom line of these businesses. So boards will say, yep, go ahead and pay $100,000 for a coach so that we get what we can from you. So if that happens on that end of it, why wouldn't we do that for ourselves? Why wouldn't we consider that someone can really help you shift the way that you have been navigating? Because when you're navigating one way, to move up, you have to do things differently than you did before. And sometimes people are ready to do that. And sometimes people don't realize that they're not ready and that they may need to just do some perspective changing there. And, one thing I want to say about pricing and coaching, there are different prices for different kinds of coaches. And I have paid a lot, I've paid a little, right? Like I've worked with people who were training and said, can I coach you? And, this much. I've also worked with coaches that have been doing it a long time or certified, and it's like this much. And honestly, I've gotten a lot from both. Not to say like you shouldn't pay more or less, but most coaches will do discovery sessions because not everybody is your style of coach either. There are people that I've actually turned away because I'm like, you're not ready. Like, I'll give you one example. There was somebody that came to me for a discovery session, and when we were talking about, okay, what kind of positions are you looking for? And the person had a lot of trauma from many different life situations and previous work experience issues. And when we were looking at what they said they wanted, oh, no, I can't do that position because it's going to trigger me. No, I don't think I can do that. I'm like, you know what? You need counseling first. I'm just respectfully, you might need to work through some of the issues that you have and work with either a trauma coach or someone that's more specialized to work on the past, because the distinction is counseling digs into your past to try to figure out how to make your future better. A coach is very much focused on the present and next and the future. We'll work with some of the past because obviously that informs how you navigate the world. But the idea of a coach is like, let's move it forward. And what are the actions you're going to take to change? Because I've also worked with someone who didn't do anything from session to session. And I'm like, sounds like you shouldn't be paying me. Why don't you re-engage when you're ready to do the work? Because I can't do the work for you. I can't care more about your life and career than you do.
We also say that with Vest membership. When we started this, we didn't want to be like a gym membership, right? Like, and so now we tell women, like, if you're comfortable where you are and you feel fulfilled and you don't have an itch to like, what's more for me or how do I leverage networks and stuff, we're probably not Vest for you. So like, save your money. But when you join a program like this, and I think it's the same with executive coaching, is you're going to get out what you put in. So, if you're going to invest, make the investment in doing stuff, it's like you have to show up and you have to have that desire to like go to the next level. Otherwise, I do think that then that's when it doesn't result as an investment, right? That's when there's not an ROI. So I love that you said that. Let me turn it over to Monica. I see that you have your hand raised, so I'll turn it over to you, Monica.
Hi, I just had a question about like career specific coaches. So I mentioned to this group last time that I'm kind of in a career transition right now myself, and I'm an attorney, and so I've kind of looked into this, executive coaching and just trying to find like our career coach, and there's some thought out there that like someone who specializes in law or whatever may be better. What are your thoughts on that? And do you find that necessarily to be true for certain practice area or certain areas, professional areas like law or marketing, or is it better to have a specific someone that's focused on that area?
My quick answer is you need someone focused on you as a human being, because you're not just a lawyer. One of the first things I do with clients, aside from the values, I was listening when you said, Erica, that you need to know what your values are and what's most important, because then any decision after that becomes so easy. That's the first thing we do. What is most important to you? What are the values that you hold? What's undeniably like, we're never going to negotiate this one thing, right? Then when you've got that all set, we work on bio language. One thing that shifted for me, and I worked with a coach to help me do this. I used to say, Sofia is the associate vice president and dean of students and blah, 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 whatever position I had. And they were like, really? Is that really you? Is that who you are? And then it really sunk in when I was in the bookstore one day and I saw this book and it's on my shelf. I don't think I've even read it, but it just stopped me in my tracks. And it was like, The Man Who Mistaken His Job for a Life. That was the title of the book. It's literally on my shelf. I guess I should read it, right? I did flip through it, but I was like, I think I mistaken myself for who I was with my job. So that's when I did change my bio, and you don't see my positions until 2 or 3 lines later, because I want to tell you my experience first and who I am, Sofia. Then you get to, and I happen to be managing director for diversity and inclusion at Billie Jean King Enterprises now. I happen to be in this role that because I am me no matter what. So back to your question specific to law, if you know you want to navigate the legal landscape in a certain way, let's say from a government perspective or from corporate law firms, I don't know if I can help in that area because there are very specific things that you need to do to become partner, and Erica probably knows this more than I do. So if you're looking for a coach to help you navigate those specific things, that is very skill-based and very specific. But if you're looking to explore and really consider how your law degree and your teachings, what you've learned and what experience you have and how you can use that in different industries, it's probably better not to have someone who's in law because they can really listen to the activities that you've done and the way you've done it and how you think about your approach to work and what's important to you and go, it sounds like you could connect with this industry or that industry and kind of expand that mind set around, well, I got a law degree, so I have to go to a law position. No, actually, there's a lot of positions that could use a legal mind, but it's not a legal position, but it's a great transferable skill to have. So I would say, as long as they send to you first and know to listen to you and not try to push you in any one direction, and will take the lead from you about what you're thinking and what you want to do and how you want to do it.
So discuss the role of executive coaching when it comes to promoting gender diversity and equality in the workplace.
I think it's rethinking structures and systems. And I can speak in the context of what we do in diversity and inclusion world. A lot of it is coaching and helping people rethink and asking the questions. Back to the questions. Did you notice this happened? When you said this, is that really matching the action that actually happened there? Sometimes we'll work with clients who are dealing with their own dynamics. They're trying to do the good work, and they're executives in senior level positions. Some of them are CEOs even, right? And they are going through their own discernment on how to make a change. So a lot of this is change management. And sometimes I'll get that question, oh, do you use change management principles? I'm like, it's all change management, right? It's all having to be someone different sometimes when you're trying to make change. So for example, I'm trying to think of a context with gender equity. If a company says, we really want to see more women in senior level positions, but their data says that the women who are advanced early in their career are dropping off in mid-level and leaving, that means there's something missing there. And, I know that there's stuff there about the broken rung, like you get up to a certain halfway up the ladder and then it's like, well, I don't have anywhere to go here because they don't see it. Sometimes asking that question and saying, hey, you're saying this, but the senior leadership here has not changed. Can you walk me through how did you select the people here? How long? I mean, if you have a company that's a small company and the senior leaders have been there 20 years, I know that that's difficult to say. How do you shift when from what they're not leaving? However, if you're saying this and in the last year or two, you hired new people because you're like, well, we need new blood. We need new perspectives. I don't buy that. And I will be the first one to challenge and say, what does new blood and new perspective mean? You don't think that some of the people that are already here could learn a new perspective? And sometimes the suggestion is, can you get them a professional development opportunity, like joining an organization like this, where they can meet people with other perspectives and new ideas? Or can they get a coach to help them think through new ideas? But I'm a joiner. I'm a big person with, the idea of community for me is really important because there are so many ways that you can learn new things and new ways of doing all your business decisions and things like that. So that's how I think coaching comes in with consulting. Consulting is and I like to talk about the distinction between all of it, right? Like, so consulting is knowledge-based. We're helping you get from one goal to this. You set a goal, you're going to get specific activities done to make sure that you achieve the thing that they brought you in as a consultant to do. So if it's diversity and inclusion, you set goals around that. So a goal could be as lofty as we want 25% of our employees to be employees of color. That is a very specific goal. Many don't do that, and I don't suggest that. Usually, I do not. Instead, I say, what are you doing so that everyone who's here feels like they belong, regardless of their background? Because what kind of place is this if you recruit someone and they don't see themselves in your business already, or don't see a way that they're going to connect and belong? Don't bother recruiting them, because they're not going to stay. So what kind of place do you want this to be for everybody? So the goals would be more like, let's create engagement opportunities. Is there an opportunity to create ERGs? So one of the things we're working on with one of our clients is employee resource groups, because they realized we want our employees to connect with each other. And that's what they said when they were assessed. You know, the employees said, we want opportunities to engage with each other and do more time around different topics that are important to us and on things that we value. So that was the goal. I know that, it's not always very finite, but it's like, we're going to launch 2 and then we're going to do 2 more, and we're going to look at what people want to focus on. So I think that was a long answer to your question, but that's the way I think of how coaching kind of goes back and forth. The consulting is the skill set. Coaching is trying to bring out the new idea from a new perspective from the person that's working with you on that.
No, I love it. I think you touch on, we had a couple of sessions back, we had the former executive of Coca-Cola, and he said the same thing. A lot of what you're saying too, it's like, you have to help executives see the value monetarily. Like, this hurts your bottom line, either with talent recruitment, retention, upskilling, all of the things that you just mentioned, but also with competitiveness, right? So like, if you're a direct-to-consumer product, look at the demographics. Do you want to appeal to women who own 85% of consumer spending and make up 40% of purchasing roles in corporate America? If so, does your team reflect that? And are you keeping women? So like, one part was like helping executives see the value of having DEI initiatives and all of that. But the number 2 is everything you just mentioned, is like, how do you keep those same executives accountable? Because it's nice to say we're focused on DEI, but how do you keep your organization and even sometimes yourself accountable, to that? So I love that you touch on all of that. There's a couple of questions on the chat that I want to address. Sue says, are coaches most helpful when changing roles, industries, or being more effective in your current role? If they can do both, how do you find a great fit for your most pressing need?
This is a great question, and I'm going to answer it by adding to the person that you asked, what was one successful, coaching situation that you've seen? And it turns out that person starts, they love them, everything's great, but like any other new transition, things come up that are identity-based. Some of it is, can you do this? Can you do that? Or not getting the resources that they need to be effective in their job. So the person came back and said, okay, I think I'm going to need the coach for the transition in to stay there and maintain the excellence that I knew I had before, but it is a different industry. So I do need to navigate space a little differently, and I need perspective on, is this racism or just a person with a jerk, right? Like trying to really like take a distance that you can do that with a coach. So I think the question is, is it more effective if you're trying to change only when you're changing industries? I think sometimes when you're trying to move up within your organization, that's a great moment to connect with a coach to help you advocate for yourself and rethink and reset. Sometimes you're just burnt out. You love the place you work at, you love your colleagues, and you're just like, I'm exhausted in this role. Could there be a different way to rethink it? A coach could help you advocate and think about how you might be able to reconfigure or reset your own self. So I've seen people do that too, where they're completely done, and then a coach helps them put it in perspective and appreciate the things that were the original why you were there, and go, oh, okay, you know what? I think I could figure out a different way to navigate, and I just need to change how I'm reacting to things around me. And I need to behave differently because I'm not going to leave this job. You're not going to get me out of here. Like I've seen this where someone, was getting well compensated in a really great role, and their first instinct was to run. And it's like, no, let's figure this out because they're not going to drive you out. Let's just navigate this differently. So I don't know if that answered your question, Sue.
Yes, and I think maybe Kristen had a second question that builds on that. So, so a coach can do all of these things. How do you find a great one?
This is a good question. For some reason, coaching has been a dirty little secret. I remember early in my career, I didn't have any problem telling people that I hired a coach to help me through interview process or transition. And I remember saying this to someone like, oh yeah, I said it in a big setting at a conference. Next thing you know, somebody at a different conference talked about how I said it. And they were like, and I can't believe that Sofia said she hired a coach. And it was like gossip. And all these people who knew me from there were texting me. So-and-so just said that you were hiring a coach. And I'm like, and? Like, that's not even gossip because it's truth. So it's fine with me. I don't care. I said it in a different setting. But it was like one of those moments where it was like, it turned into as if it was not supposed to be something that's common knowledge. There are people who have used coaches. So I think asking people, hey, have you ever used a coach? And did you find them effective? Would you recommend that I work with them? So sometimes recommendations from other people is a really big way. If you meet many successful people that you admire them, you love the way they operate, and there's just something about them, you go, you know what? I hope you don't mind me asking, but have you ever worked with a coach? I'm gonna tell you probably 9 times out of 10, they probably did at some point. So they could give you that recommendation. In terms of the search, yes, the ICF directory would be a good one. You could also look at training schools that train coaches. Usually will find you someone who needs hours to get certified, because you need 100 hours to get certified. So if, let's say, money is a factor for you and you can't spend a lot on a coach, there's a lot of folks that are in training that are excellent, amazing people that are just don't have the credential just yet, but they could give you probably a good rate because they want the hours, and you need 75 paid, 25 unpaid. You might even get someone who's willing to give you hours because they can add it to their next level of coaching certification. So like for PCC, you need 500 hours. So you may find someone who's like, yep, let's meet every week for a year so I can get my time in.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of other ways, like Academy for Creative Coaching. I don't have a directory in my head, but maybe that's a good exercise to do, like collect all the different coaching training schools, and also coaches that may be at capacity, but they know other coaches. A lot of coaches talk to each other all the time and can refer to each other.
Sophia, there is one question, and this is more like a private, anonymously, that I was asked to ask here. She says, I'm struggling. So this is coaching for her. I'm struggling with organizations seeing me as someone who can and is willing to be the second level executive who wants to learn, and hiring me with that in mind, or just hiring me in the top level position.
It's hard to not have context, but if it's that an opening is coming up and you're trying to be seen as the next successor of that role.
So I think she is kind of in that transition, like looking to be higher as a top level executive, but still having challenges with those organizations seeing her as a top level executive.
Oh, okay. The way I answer this one when people ask is, what language are you using to describe your work? When you're in an interview setting, if you are very task oriented in the way you speak, they see you as admin or closer to a mid-level or a tasky level person. If you speak about big ideas, goal setting, and kind of like 30,000 feet language versus 10,000 feet, then they see you as someone who could think big and can think more strategically. So it's hard to do that in like a short amount of time, but that's some of what I covered even in the Latina Inside Academy. It's like, what are you bringing to your supervisor? Are you sitting there with your list of, and this one gave me looked at me funny, and this one, all the drama and the tasky stuff that as you move up. Like when I was dean of students, I had 8 direct reports, a whole bunch of departments reporting to me, and I would say to them, please bring me 30,000 feet. because I don't have time anymore. I have, 10,000 students, a whole bunch of parents calling me. I have so much going on. I need to know from a 30,000 feet level. I don't want to know who's not showing up to your staff meeting. That's yours to deal with your direct reports. I want to know systemically what are the big issues that I need to weigh in on only. Right. So like, when you start changing your language to be more big picture, that's when I think you can become more seen as that person that can think like that and not get mired in the details. Again, it's hard to do this, not knowing what the context is, but I hope that's a little bit helpful.
Super helpful. And unfortunately, we're running out of time. So I want to close with a couple of things. Please, as you're thinking about executive coaching, think of different things. It could be for career transition. It could be to level up your game in your existing organization. It could be for burnout. You talked a little bit about that, Sofia, when you're feeling burnout and like, how do you manage everything that you currently have so that you stay at those leadership positions. It could be accountability. It could be, addressing DEI. Like if I'm an executive and I really want to do this, but I want to do it right. And I want to create systems that really enable, equity around my workplace. So, just don't think of executive coaching as it's one bucket. As Sofia mentioned, there's several different things that you can do. Sofia, are you still doing executive coaching one-on-one?
I very limited. I do. But I have a network of people that I admire and who are amazing coaches. So if you reached out to me, I can absolutely connect you. And most people do a free discovery session. Take full advantage of that. You get a nice 30 to 45 minute of, working on a targeted issue. And that's when it's a good fit or not. But also you got yourself a nice little session there. So I would say interview many coaches so they can give you some advice or help and help you think things through, but you could also see what kind of style you like to work with. I'm a very task-oriented person with activities and very actionable things in between. If there are some coaches that are more about big picture life and really, philosophy, and I ain't got time for that. If we're going to get paid, we got to do some things. Like we got to change up what we're doing, because clearly what you're doing isn't working if it's not getting you to where you need to go or where you want to go.
If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend and don't forget to leave us a review. And if you're ready to take your career to the next level, apply to join our community of professional women, all eager to help you get there and stay there. Go to www.besther.co and apply today.